Howdy folks, monthly update for the month of November. As I said here, 1st of December 2023. We're going to go through some stats and thanks and some of the big news stories that have been going on in the world of rugby. But I have to admit, it's kind of an anticlimactic feeling here at the moment here in NZ after the World Cup. Everything just seems such a step down. I don't mean to kind of poo-poo on the club games which are going on in Europe because the top 14's in full swing, likewise the Premiership and the URC. But here in NZ, there's no rugby on. The only rugby that's really getting talked about is a little bit about the Super Rugby squads and jerseys and what Razor's going to do with the All Blacks next year. But after the World Cup, rugby just shuts down here in NZ. It's like the day after a big party where you just left kind of cleaning up the house and trying to figure out who broke your favorite cup or something like that. There's, from the big kind of exciting feeling that was the World Cup, now there's nothing. So it's quite a drop from the World Cup to pure rugby nothingness here in NZ. Anyway, but as I said, I have certainly been getting my fill of some of the games from South Africa and Europe, and the Champions Cup is actually not too far away, which is a good one because I'll finally get to see some French teams. Like if I look at the audiences, if we get to some stats. South Africa, UK, New Zealand, Ireland, Australia. That's top 5 who tune into this channel. Thank you guys all for coming along. And USA, Canada next. I guess English-speaking countries kind of makes sense. But then top country outside of the English-speaking world is France. Hello, French fans. And often French fans give me grief for not watching the top 14. It's not broadcast here, but I look forward to seeing your French teams in the Champions Cup. I believe that is going to be broadcast here in NZ. At least it has been for the last few years. So yes, I look forward to seeing the likes of the La Rochelles and the Toulouses and whatnot get back into the action. Other stats before we move on to some news. Age group wise, the 35 to 44 year olds are catching the 25 to 34 year olds in terms of viewership numbers. There's only about 1% between, but 25 to 34 year olds remain the biggest group. And 66% of people still not subscribed. If you're here and you haven't, please do us a favor and subscribe. I always forget to ask. People ask me in the comments to remind people to like and subscribe. I'm terrible for remembering that kind of thing, but if you haven't done it and you wouldn't mind it, please, push that wee button for us. Also, some thanks to you guys for doing the liking and the subscribing and the commenting, even after the World Cup, but also to the patrons for supporting the channel. I'll scroll their names up here. If you didn't know, we do have a Patreon page for 2 Cents Rugby. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to support the channel. Like these lovely people, like Angus, like Jack McHugh and Matt Barrett as well, for supporting the channel, and new people. We had Toby and Colm come on in the last month as well. So if you want to join them, Patreon down in the description, a little bit of extra content too. Although I should say, if you're totally sick of the rugby stuff, if you're pretty much rugbyed out and you want to see some travel stuff, maybe a little bit of history, I don't know, 2 cents or two. If you want to see me getting told off by a Chinese fireman for filming a football stadium over in China, which sounds really random, but it happened to me back in April. 2 Cents on Tour is another channel, largely not rugby related. But yeah, hopefully something a little entertaining as something a bit different. But yeah, please check that out. If you got a bit of time on your hands now that the World Cup's over, I would much appreciate that too. Rugby news wise, Owen Farrell is maybe the biggest headline maker at the moment because he said he's going to sit out the next Six Nations in 2024. So the Six Nations is going to be missing him. It's going to be missing Antoine Dupont as well, as he focuses on the kind of sevens thing. But Farrell basically said that he wants to prioritize his and his family's well-being. He is going to keep playing for his club, Saracens, during the Six Nations. So he's not going to be taking a total rugby break. And it has been a pretty full-on year for him. With the World Cup and all the controversy, his dad described it as a circus. When he didn't get banned and then he got banned. But he's far from the first guy in that kind of age bracket at 32 years old to want to take a break. Most recently, Michael Hooper took a bit of a mental health break from Wallabies duties. And 10 years ago, some of the All Blacks guys started taking, we call them sabbaticals down here in NZ. They usually have it built into their contracts with New Zealand Rugby, but Richie McCaw took 6 months off from All Rugby. Then he came back looking all happy and rejuvenated. So Dan Carter took 6 months off. Conrad Smith took 6 months off. So those guys just took breaks from rugby totally, and they all mentioned getting not only their bodies back in order after taking, big hits for as many years as they had to kind of get rid of some niggling injuries, but also their mental health. They were talking about that 10 years ago. So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing for a guy in his position to want to take a break, although it's a bit different and he's going to keep playing for his club. It's more like what we see from the All Blacks these days when they take sabbaticals and that they keep playing, but just not in NZ. So it used to be that sabbaticals here in New Zealand, guys like Smith and McCaw and Carter would just take time off from All Rugby to get themselves in a good place. But more recently, the sabbaticals, for New Zealand players anyway, have been kind of financially driven ones. Like Beauden Barrett spent some time in Japan. Sam Cane's off in Japan now. He's going to be taking a sabbatical. Brody Retallick's done it before. Adi Savia's doing it now. Damien McKenzie didn't really do it in the sabbatical form, and he didn't have a contract clause that said he could go to Japan, but he just finished his contract with New Zealand, went to Japan, and then came back and then got a new contract. So, yeah, it's certainly been a done thing before, and hopefully Farrell comes back rejuvenated after it. I do think it did well for the likes of McCaw and Carter and Smith back in the days. Not sure about the guys going to Japan. I mean, the Springbok guys, a lot of them play their rugby in Japan these days and come back playing bloody well for the Springboks. So, yeah, it certainly can be a good thing to take your mind off internationals for a while, I guess. Six Nations also, which is on the horizon. It's not that far away. My dad actually sent me a message the other day saying, son, I've been following the URC a wee bit and the Premiership and whatnot. But he said he's looking forward to the Six Nations. He's already looking forward to it. So as much as the kind of results from the domestic rugby will kind of get him by, he's looking forward to the Six Nations. But aren't we all? But yeah, there's talks that it may end up going behind a paywall in the UK. Currently, the split between ITV and BBC keeps things free to air in the UK. But the outgoing director of sports from the BBC said it's going to be difficult for them to retain the rights in the future due to the fact that the BBC makes less money than it used to, and sports broadcasting rights cost a lot more than they used to. So the costs of providing free-to-air coverage for the Six Nations are ever increasing. So there's a risk that it may go behind a paywall. I'm in New Zealand where virtually all the rugby is behind a paywall and has been behind a paywall for much of my life, and I do believe it is a contributing factor to a shrinking rugby audience here in NZ because, yeah, it just used to be on all TVs, and then it just became a thing where everybody had Sky, which is the New Zealand paid TV broadcaster, but nowadays the amount of people I know who have Sky, which has all the rugby, the Super Rugby and all the All Blacks games and whatnot, I don't know many. My dad has Sky. I don't think any of my best mates have Sky. My brother doesn't have Sky. He has Netflix. He has YouTube Premium. Doesn't have Sky. So, yeah, I do think in the UK where rugby is certainly not the number one game, and you've got the kind of inverted pyramid of rugby fans, right? There's people at the top who will tune into the World Cup. That's your biggest, broadest audience. Below that, I think, is your people who will tune into Test rugby, which is not World Cup rugby, and in particular I would say the Six Nations for you guys in those Six Nations countries. That is the biggest draw apart from the World Cup. Below that you've probably got your July and November internationals, and then below that your Premiership and your Super Rugby and your URC and whatnot. But yeah, it's a very much a shrinking group of fans. So if you put the Six Nations behind a paywall, that slice of the pyramid is just going to shrink. There are people who will not pay to watch Test rugby, for sure. It'll happen. And there are people who will start off and then they'll lose their job or take a pay cut or have a kid or something like that. Priorities will shift and then they'll cut back on that kind of thing. So as much as the game needs investment and it needs money, you also need fans. So I, unsurprisingly, would not be keen to see it go behind a paywall in the UK, even though it wouldn't really affect me. I don't think it'd be a great thing for the game. And lastly, Simon, it's free to air in Ireland, which is great news. I hope you guys can keep it free. I think it's mostly free in France as well. Simon Raiwalui, the former coach of Fiji at the World Cup, resigned his role as Fijian coach, even though they were keen to keep him on. He's moving on to World Rugby in a role which is called High Performance Pathways and Player Development Manager. And his remit is to increase the competitiveness of international games, and I think with a mind on the with an eye on the expanded World Cup, which is going to include more teams. It's an interesting one to have a guy in that role, and then on the other hand, you also have this World League, which is going to essentially cut off a bunch of the Tier 2 teams from top level action. So he's got a tough job ahead of him. He's a smart guy. Hopefully he's got some actual authority to push for some changes, or push for some games between the Tier 2 sides and the kind of Six Nations Rugby Championship sides, because yeah, if anything, those pathways seem to be getting cut off rather than established, despite what World Rugby has said they were going to do pre-COVID. So, yeah, folks, there you go. Monthly update. Thanks a lot, all of you guys, for coming along. Once again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it. Check out 2 Cents on Tour if you haven't done it. If you want some England Rugby gear, England Rugby Store, I'll put a link down in the description to them as well. They're always having sales on, and with the Six Nations coming up, it's a good time to get some rugby gear. It's always a good time to get some rugby gear. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts on Farrell taking a wee break from international rugby. Six Nations going behind a paywall, possibly, in the UK. And what do you think about Simon Raiwalui's new role? You guys take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.